Hello and good afternoon to you, wherever you're social distancing, or even if you're not social distancing at the moment as things are starting to open up. Welcome to this Target Jobs webinar on what to do if you haven't got a summer internship and how to boost your employability. You lucky people, it's just me today, and I'm going to be walking you through some of the issues around internships and placements and sort of general useful skills to boost your applications. As always, so sorry, my name is Matt. I'm one of the editors for Target Jobs. As always, you can ask questions. We have a question feed on the right-hand side. If you do see a question that you want answered, please click the upvote button. And when we get to the questions at the end, I will start with the questions that have the most upvotes. So please feel free to ask a question anytime. Absolutely no limits, but I will answer as many as I can get through at the very end. As I see someone's already asking, will we get this PowerPoint? I think we can try to send out this will be on uploaded to YouTube and will be up on targetjobs.co.uk as well. So while we probably won't be providing the PowerPoint to you, you'll have the video to go back to and refer to at any time of this. I just want to get started, and we'll have a little look at what we're going to be talking about. So there's a few caveats of coronavirus job hunting. I know it feels like we're nearly at the end of this, but obviously things have changed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What's different about placements and internships? Any important considerations, particularly for those of you who are on university courses where you may require a placement in order to get your degree. The application process, general applications you have to go through for a lot of internships. The difference between a strengths and a competency-based application. We'll talk a little bit about CVs and covering letters, just in case, you know, because it depends on the employer. Some still do choose to use the traditional CV and covering letter, and we'll look at questions at the end. So hopefully that's all fairly straightforward. The caveats of COVID-19, which I've been sort of telling anybody on these webinars, you have to have patience. You have to remember that even though we are, you know, now a year and just over a year on into this, people are still getting used to it. They're still running recruitment cycles now that they maybe haven't run since March last year. So as soon as that all starts up, they're probably a lot better planned and everything else. I was going to say, if someone can say, if you are having audio issues, please do. The only thing I can suggest is that if you are using a browser, try to use the Chrome browser, is where the webinar platform works best. Thank you very much, someone, for letting us know. So yes, as I say, the recruitment cycles are still coming up at the moment, and you know, people are they're going to be better planned. They're going to be a lot more used to remote working, but there will still be issues, and you need to have patience. You can't expect that you are going to get up to the minute, you know, sort of within minutes of sending an email, getting a reply back from the employer. You have to remember that they may have all sorts of going on. They may have to have discussions and meetings and everything else. Maybe their phone system is set up for remote working as well. So just be a little bit patient with employers. It's frustrating for you, but it's also, I'm telling you truthfully, it's frustrating for them as well. And be prepared for sudden changes and deferred dates. No one can predict the future. If the last year has taught us nothing, it's that there is absolutely no way to know whether we're going to end up in a I worry about saying this, touch wood, a third lockdown, a fourth lockdown, a fifth lockdown. So just be prepared for sudden changes and deferred dates. You don't know. Get ready for virtual interactions. So that's make sure your tech works. We're already having, you know, whoever's talking about audio issues. This is it. You've got to try out platforms and things that I know you can't for the webinar, but when you're getting ready to have a Zoom call or something with someone, you have to make sure that you've got the right internet connection. One of my colleagues recommends, when you do have to have a call with an employer, you get your family to go out for their exercise, or you get your roommates to go out for their exercise, your housemates to go out for their exercise, so you've got that free bandwidth, so that hopefully everything works a little bit smoother. So make sure that your technology works. Get into a professional routine when you've got applications to make, when you've got interviews to go to for internships or anything like that. Make sure that you've got your dress code sorted out so that you look reasonably smart on camera. Make sure that you know, you're sitting down, you've got a glass of water, you've got your notes next to you, maybe you've got any extra material that you want to provide that's ready to go, or even if it's on your computer and it's files that you're going to be sending. Make sure you've got a routing down and that you've got a nice kind of organized flow to whenever you're going to have any interactions. Update your LinkedIn profile if you're applying for internships, and even you can put on there under the little sort of personal bio bit, looking for internships in the field of, with employers such as, you know, you can tell people that you're out there, you're looking for internships, and that, you know, can sometimes make it easier, because that's the way that people are looking at your CV probably more these days, is online, and LinkedIn is a very good venue for that. Have a quiet location if you're ever going to speak to employers, whether that's at a recruitment event or whether that's at an interview or even virtual assessment centers or even on virtual internships. Make sure you just have a quiet location that is at least tidy in the background, and just get yourself sort of sorted out for any interactions you're going to have. The last one, again, is make sure your tech works, because it was one of the biggest complaints that we've had when we've been talking to employers about internships, is that there are constant dropouts, and then they have to try and chase people around, and then they need to get mobile phone numbers that they may not have, depending on what you filled out on an online profile. So it's always, if you can test a system beforehand, definitely do, and be prepared for more competition, which is something, it's, the number of placements is likely to be down. I think there was an ISE study last year that suggested you could be talking about sort of a 40% reduction in internships and placements, but there was an increase in the things like insight days and various other things. But you're still going to see more competition, because obviously everybody is in this situation at the moment, and it is a lot easier when you have a bit more time, when you're not really maybe going out as much, to start making applications. So do be prepared for it. Okay. So placements, what is actually going to be different with internships and placements? So delays is the common one, particularly with anything that's in technical discipline, anything that involves a lab or a workshop. You may have cancellations as well. They may be replaced by insight days, which may be held virtually. There may be high levels of competition, because obviously as everything is deferred, some get cancelled, that the remaining people who would have been applying for those internships and placements, they will be going for the ones that are still open. So be ready for the high levels of competition. There may be a move to virtual placements, and that may not end with the pandemic. So do just be aware, people are finding out that it is, it's a little bit sort of cheaper and easier, and sometimes you can run things online. You realize that people don't necessarily always need the commutes, and sometimes the work can get done virtually. So you may see after the pandemic is over, that there may still be a number of virtual placements on the go. And application deadlines may close. And this is something that I want to stress, is we always say apply as early as you can. We have had anecdotal evidence from employers at the moment saying that they will close applications early. And it's not, it's in the name of fairness, really, because they've had so many in the first however long that they've opened to applications. So maybe they were planning to run for 3 months, and in the first month they get more than they would normally get in your average kind of non-pandemic times. So they're closing early so that they can be fair and look at everybody's kind of application and judge them appropriately, rather than have far too many and not be able to get through them. So there is an element, it sounds bad in the sense that you might not know that something is going to close early, but if you apply as early as you possibly can, you're still in with a chance. And as I say to you, from what we've heard anecdotally, it is in the name of fairness. Is we're like, okay, we have this many people, we want to check over thoroughly this many people. We don't want to be ignoring huge numbers, because we can't get through that if we open for another 2 months. So be aware of early closures to application deadlines. I'm not saying it is definitely going to happen, but I'm saying it's something you should be aware of. And definitely, if you can get your application in earlier rather than later, that will certainly help your case. Okay. So the important things, excuse me a second. Now, if your placement or internship is essential to your course progression, and this is the kind of caveat I wanted to make clear, proactively talk to your university. And I really, when I say proactively, I want to stress the proactive part of that. You really, really do need to make contact. You need to be the one initiating contact, and you need to be the one following up, and you need to do it as early as you possibly can. Again, anecdotally from speaking to universities, there are people who have needed a placement to complete their course that was due to take place over the summer, and they needed to have applied for it by the September or October in the year before, and they didn't follow up with their university, and they've missed out on their placements. So proactively reach out to your university, make sure you know the dates, follow up with people. I know that everybody's busy, and administrators and lecturers alike, but you do need to keep in regular contact, and you need to be the one driving that. So really, don't be shy about it, don't delay it, don't put it off. Definitely talk to them, and talk to your university's careers service. because if you have had a placement or internship that you haven't been able to undertake, they may be able to help you. They have the alumni networks, they have their own connections with employers, they have their own connections with organizations. So definitely talk to your university career service, explain your situation, say exactly what you need. And again, the onus is on you to follow up with them and to chase them and to get in contact with them. Check for regular updates on employer websites as well, because it is very easy to say, well, I'm just going to use the generalized application system, but you can look at specific employers' websites, and don't be afraid to reach out by email, by telephone, by carrier pigeon, absolutely anything that you need to. Again, the onus is on you to make that contact. And if you need this placement to do your course, then you will, reach out to an employer, even if it's a speculative application, make sure that they get the message. You really want to do this. You make a strong case for why you want to do it with them. And you make sure that you get a response. Even if that response comes back to you and it says, well, we're not doing it until next year or something like that, at least you've got it. You need to make sure that you speak to them. If you get nothing back, then you need to try another method of communication. Don't pass up on a virtual internship if you're offered that instead of a in-person internship. Don't pass it up because of the stigma of virtual. I think there's an element out there at the moment of saying, well, virtual, it's not the same because you're not in the environment, you don't have the water cooler, and you can't, scrounge free tea bags out of the company. Don't give up on it just because it's virtual. This, as I say to you, this may continue after the pandemic. So be ready to go out there and just get involved with it and get what you can out of it. And I can see someone's commenting on the university career services. It depends on the university, it depends on the career service, but they are certainly people you could talk to for advice. Okay, be aware of the size of the employer that you're applying to, if how many candidates they're likely to have. Smaller employers you may find, because they have less applications than the major employers that are taking on thousands and thousands of people at the same time, you may have more luck trying there. Ultimately, there may be that everybody is going for the smaller employers. So just be aware of the size of the employer, the type of application that you're going to have to make, and the kind of contact that you can have with them. It may be easier to meet smaller employers, to have a chat with them informally, to ask about internships and placements, and maybe you'll get some, if you don't get given an internship through an application process that way, maybe they'll be able to point you somewhere that you can. And the last one I put on that list is again to do with those early application closing deadlines. Apply as early as you can. I can't emphasize this enough at the moment. It's just one of those kind of phenomenon. Definitely get it in the first week. Get it in as soon as you can get it done. I promise you, you won't regret that. Okay. So looking at the application process, there are three main types of application that you might make going for an internship. So it might be a strengths-based online application process, which will be, you'll all be familiar with the kind of online forms. You're essentially filling in bits of information from your CV, and then you'll be answering specific questions. And then there is a traditional, more motivational and competency-based application process, which will be, again, it will be a similar format, but the questions will be slightly different, and they will be looking at testing slightly different things. And there will also be the very traditional emailed CV and covering letter. Okay. So the strengths-based application process and these kind of application forms are used by a huge number of employers across different sectors. And we've got a list there of some that a colleague sent to me that have worked with target jobs in the past. So there's Fidelity, HSBC, KPMG, Mott MacDonald, and Jaguar Land Rover. So you've got everything in there from finance to engineering to kind of property and construction. So there are a number out there that use this kind of application form process. And the strengths-based application process is a simple application form. It may also include an online immersive assessment, which is a video, introduces you to the company, presents you with different situations, and asks you questions how you might, about how you'd respond to different situations that you're given. It could be multiple choice. It could have a written answer. You may be asked to, you may be answering that, in a form, or you may be typing it out. You could be recording a video of yourself answering it, or you could even be speaking to a person who's doing this virtually via, one of the various services that are out there for this sort of thing. You may be involved in a job simulation, and that's a similar video, normally a bit more specific to the role, particularly if it's got any kind of technical aspect. The questions, again, you might be writing them, you might be recording yourself. And then there could be an assessment center or an interview, and strengths-based questions that you're likely to get in these kind of application processes are: what motivates you, who inspires you, Would you rather work in a team or individually? And if a customer was unhappy with the service they've received, how would you persuade them to keep on using your business? And these are, they require you to have had some experience somewhere in a workplace or in university that you can use to back up your answers, but they are different from competency-based questions where you're going to say, this is an example of a time when. Strengths-based questions can sometimes look at what drives you, what motivates you, and how you are going to approach a workplace. So it's designed to capture your natural responses to situations and how you prefer to work. The employers are going to be looking at whether you have the behaviors, the strengths, and the values that they seek. And that's why we say research the employer. If you go onto a lot of employers' websites and they'll have our core values, our manifesto, what we aim to do. That's the kind of thing that you are likely, you're likely to be asked about at interview. And it's the kind of thing that you need to match up with yourself. You need to say, right, well, how do I fit in with this particular value? How do I fit in with that particular value? What is it that motivates me? And actually, I think we have a webinar, if we go back through the past webinars page on Target Jobs, on resilience. And there's an excellent, it was a lady from KPMG joined us for that webinar, and she spoke a lot about how you need to attain a growth mindset and the differences between different mindsets and how you can establish your own. It's really, really useful webinar to go and watch. And I think it's the kind of thing that when you come to these strengths-based questions will really help. So I do recommend you go back to our employability webinars page and do dig that one out. So you need to think about your strengths, what you need to perform at your best, use the practice questions, and you can go on to Target Jobs. You can actually see some of these practice questions if you just Google strengths-based applications, Target Jobs, and it will take you straight to the page. And you can practice situational judgment tests as well, which are the kind of things that you're likely to get as part of a virtual assessment center, or even just at your original kind of internship interviews. You can find links on Target Jobs again. If you go to targetjobs.co.uk/tests, you can practice. There's some free ones, there's some paid ones. Just try them out, see how you get on, and then try and read around some of the explanations as to how you did and why, and see if you can improve when you come up to do the real thing. Okay. So for both CV and traditional online applications, recruiters are looking to see two things. They're looking to see that you have the skills and qualities required. So these are a list of skills. These are not obviously every skill that you are going to get for every employer, but they are a list of the common ones, and that is things like commercial awareness, problem solving and analytical skills, communication and influencing skills, planning and organization, teamwork, leadership, resilience, and managing change. You're going to need to provide evidence that you have these skills when you're applying for an internship. And this is very similar to applying for a job. It's going to be the same kind of process. It's just that hopefully by the time you reach that stage, you'll have a little bit more experience and you'll know what to expect. So you need to also give the impression, this is the second thing, that you only want to work for this specific employer. So that is a single employer, not just in the field, not just, well, because you do engineering and I want to do engineering. It's like, no, it needs to be, I want to do engineering and I want to do it with you because of this. So you need to show that you know the employer. You need to know what they do. You need to know what makes them different in the market. You need to know what differentiates them from the competition. You need to know what being a graduate with them will be like. And you need to know why what you know about them makes you want to work for them. So you need to identify with it in some way. And there are a number of ways you can do this. We'll talk a little bit about it in a second, but there are, Twitter feeds for trainees. For anybody who's interested in law, many of the major law firms have a Twitter feed that is run exclusively by trainees, and they post pictures of what they're doing and there's some of their experiences and things like that. It's a good way to learn about it. That's if you can't get to a recruitment fair or a virtual recruitment fair and meet them and talk to them face to face, and ask them questions. So you need to know what the workplace is like, and you need to know why they are different in the market, and they will have things on their website that will tell you a little bit about that. But you will also it will be good to go to recruiters and to ask them and to say, well, I'm trying to find out why this case you did is different to that case you worked on. If it was an engineering project or anything like that, you can say, well, I need to weigh up why have they taken a different approach? Why is this more important to this employer, to that employer? You should never be able to write an application that could go to both, if that makes sense. So we'll just have a quick look at the traditional competency-based application form. And this is, you normally, again, you'll have your basic kind of sections of the form that require your basic personal information, your contact, education details, work experience history. Normally you'll have most of that on a CV or LinkedIn. You'll just be tailoring it a little bit to the application form that you're working on. You will probably be asked to take an online ability test. That's the thing I was saying you can practice on target jobs. And they normally will test your numeracy, your verbal reasoning, your situational judgment, that sort of thing. And I know it sounds silly because it's supposed to test how good you are naturally at these things, but the more you practice these kind of tests, the better you get at them. And it's actually a similar thing with IQ tests as well. I know that it's there to test the IQ, and that should be same. And the tests are aimed at slightly different ages and things like that. But I think statistically, the more you practice them, the better you do get at them. So it is worth giving it a try, and it is worth being ready for these, particularly with some of the larger employers, and the public sector is very fond of these kind of tests as well. So whether it's a job or an internship, you may have, I think the only difference will be the scale of the test that you're likely to undertake. So they may ask you to also upload a CV covering letter, any module transcripts, that sort of thing. And then they'll have a mix of motivational and competency-based questions. So that'll be, why do you want to work for our employer? And that's what I was saying, that's where your research comes in. And at the moment, because we've been in lockdown and we've had this time, this is the best time to be reading. Take the long view. If you've been reading a year's worth of a company's blog to find out every project they've been working on, how they've been adapting to the pandemic and everything, you've got a great insight into that employer at the moment. They may ask you to state how you're suited to the placement in particular, to the internship in particular, why it is that you particularly want to get experience. And that may be to do with your longer career goals, but you also need to relate that back to the employer, and you need to give some experience that you've had of talking to them, dealing with them, contacting their employees on LinkedIn perhaps, or meeting them at virtual fairs. You might be asked about your career aspirations as well. So you may, everybody will have a slightly different approach, but the chances are, if you're applying for an internship with a company, you may eventually want to work for them in the future. And you need to back it up. You need to have researched the employer, and you need to be able to say why it is you want to work for them in future and explain your career aspirations. And then this is your typical competency-based question. Give us an example of a time when you worked in a team to solve a problem. And that is where you will need to go back through your experience. Doesn't necessarily need to be in a workplace, but obviously it helps if it does, if it's been a professional setting. But you need to think about that example. I'll give you a way to present that in a minute. And you will need to be able to write out what you did exactly. And we'll talk a little bit about how to structure those kind of answers on forms in just a second. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to try and whiz through some of the kind of essential points so we can make sure that we've got enough time for questions at the end. So this is how to answer motivational questions. So it's the why have you applied? Why would you be good? Again, we talked about research already. Show that what you found out means something to you. And sometimes it's a case of, perhaps when you see a project on an employer's website and you look at that and you go, they work in Dubai refinancing something, and I just don't have any connection to that. You need to look at your own life and go, well, when have I been interested in the finance side of something? And if you have got a genuine interest in it, you will have an example, something you've thought about. It might even be really out there. It might just be something that you do by playing with apps on your phone or something. But you need to find something that connects to what they do. If you have got an employer that's doing sort of refinancing somewhere in the world, look at when you've had some kind of experience in your life that has generated an interest, that has caused you to go out and do something, and show that it connects back to that. You need to relate it back to what the employer is trying to is asking you. You need to, they do something, and that's how it connects to me. I do, this is why I'm interested. You're building a kind of connection when you're answering that question. So you need to give evidence that you have the skills and motivation you want. And again, I'll talk to you a little bit about the STAR method and everything in a minute as to how you can present that. Don't just plonk your research about an employer into the middle of an answer, telling the recruiter what they know. Your company is fantastic. You're at the cutting edge of technology, has been shown with your work with AI. You're telling them a lot about the company. You're not telling them a lot about yourself. You need to have something in there that says, I really appreciated your work with AI. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this sort of thing in a minute. And as I already mentioned, you shouldn't be able to switch the names of employers on your applications and have it do the same job. So I think we covered that quite enough in the earlier slides. So this is an example for a site management job, and I thought this is probably a bit easier than the refinancing example. My interest in sustainability, which is demonstrated by my final year project on how climate change could affect the lifetime health of tall structures, means that I'm particularly impressed by your success at meeting your interim targets for 0% to landfill. I would like to contribute to you meeting future targets. Now, it's obviously a very basic example, but it starts with your interest, my interest. It's giving you something, giving something to the employer. This is my interest. This is what I have done that is connected to that interest, and this is why I like what you've done. You have built that bridge. So this is something that I am interested in. This is something that I have done because I'm interested, and this is how it relates to what you do. I thought that was it's a simple way, but it's an easy way to fill in some of these kind of application forms. Assuming that you've got an interest and assuming that you've acted on it, you will have something that will be able to connect to the employer. So this is what I was talking about, answering competency-based questions. Tell me about a time when. So answer the specific question, mirror the language used. And this goes, I've been saying this a lot more and more lately. Anywhere that uses any kind of software to scan through CVs and applications, you want to mirror the language that they're using in the job application. You want to mirror the languages that they're using in the question, just in case. The chances are many won't be using any kind of software, but it's a good catch-all. If they are looking for certain keywords and you've used the keywords that are in the question or that have been asked of you, it might get picked up by the system. So that's a good practice to get into anyway. So answer the specific question, mirror the language. Stress quantities, personal responsibilities, and achievements. Like, it's particularly in the private sector, numbers are king. Stress that when you have had responsibility and personal responsibility, and then obviously any achievements that you've had are excellent as well. And the STAR method is the way to present it. So the situation you were faced with, the tasks you had to complete, the actions you took, and the results. And the caveat I want to add in here is that it should be one instance. So you want that to be just one time, one example. You do not want to say, well, I worked this job for 5 years. No. You want to tell them one thing that happened during those 5 years. So it's like, we had 1 week to put together this project. It was 1 week out of this long experience that I did. And you really need to narrow down the time scale as much as you can. So we'll talk a little bit about STAR and how STAR works. I think we've got an example coming up. So don't write, while I was in my second year, we organised a social event for charity. It gives you a sort of general, again, very general time frame, doesn't really give you much about the event. Using the STAR method, the situation, I organised the publicity for a fundraising event to support cancer research. So that's the situation. The task, I produced posters and negotiated with the local copy shop to print them for cost price. I put the posters up on campus. So this is a situation and your task. And the action, I put the posters up on campus and in local businesses. I also promoted the event via my student union's Twitter and Instagram accounts. And the result was over 150 students attended and we raised £500. Getting those numbers in there, showing off a number of different skills. And it's a very time limited event as well. So it's a very short space of time. You've got the situation, the task, the action, and the results with numbers. That it shows that you've understood, you've got, I know that this was an example of a time when I have done something that you need to represent to an employer. So that's kind of how you would use the STAR method to adapt a very small event into a paragraph that shows you've got the skills and the acumen to be part of a business workplace. So CVs, and I realize I'm rushing through this, but as I say, we want to be able to make time for questions. So on a CV, you need to give details of your education, your work experience, and your extracurricular activities. You don't need to use a rigid format. Everybody panics about what they need to put at the top of the CV. You use whatever headings best sells you. So if you haven't had much in the way of work experience, but you have a lot of academic qualifications and you're going for a job that is very sort of academic heavy, you may want to have your academic, or you're going for an internship that is requiring a degree of specialist knowledge, you may want to have your academics at the top rather than your experience. If it's more of an experience-based placement, you might want to, they need to know that you can get into a new workplace, or that you've had other experience in the field in order to do the internship, then you might want to put your experience towards the top. So you don't need to stick to a rigid format. You don't just say what you have done, you have to say how well you've done it. That's why I was saying numbers are your friend. It went from this number to that number, which shows that it was increasing, therefore it was good. It's keep it very simple, in terms that a manager will understand, or in terms that a potential employer or some company that's going to host you for an internship will understand. So you allocate the most space to the most important information, the activities that demonstrate your skills and achievements, the things that they're asking you about when you're coming into a placement. You can tweak your master CV for each application. You can rearrange the bullet points in each section of your CV to put evidence that you have the skills in prime position. That's what I said. You always put at the top the thing that you think is going to get you that internship, the thing that you think that the person who is reading that and deciding who is going to be the intern for however long, a couple of months this year, what they want to read is what needs to go at the top. If you use a personal statement or profile, make sure it's tailored. So for the example we have here is don't put I'd like to work in marketing or publishing if you're applying to a marketing agency, because that says, well, I wouldn't mind doing what you do, but I'd quite happily do something else. No, you need to make it really, really specific. I would like to work in marketing and I want to work for you, because you need a personal statement that is going to be tailored to the employer. That's if you use it. It's increasingly common not to have that anymore. It's a very sort of a little bit old school. You do still get it. There's nothing wrong with it, but as I say, you need to tailor it for each employer. It's a simple thing about CVs. If you go on to targetjobs.co.uk and go /CV, we've got plenty of templates, and there's more tips on how to put together a CV there. You can also just put target jobs and how to write a CV into Google, and it will take you straight to the page. Covering letters, by far the worst part of any application for an internship job or anything else. Always address appropriately, dear, and ideally you should have a name. I always recommend, I'm from a journalism background, and as journalism students, I always recommend you should have a name, because that will be part of your job. You always need to ring up and say, who am I applying to, not to whom it may concern. Your first paragraph should be why you would be a good hire. That's where you start out with your STAR method answers. I think I would be good at, I would be good at working in a team because of this: time, situation, task, action, result, and stress that you have the relevant skills for an internship. You have what it takes, and that might very often be soft skills, particularly for internships. The next paragraph will be why the employer, and again, that's what we talked about, connecting what they are looking for with what your interest, what you've done, back to the employer. And the last paragraph is just say that you look forward to hearing from them, and always sign it off appropriately. You can look this up, it's all online. Sincerely if it's to a named person, faithfully if it's to dear sir or madam, but always try and get a name, even if it just means a polite phone call to say, excuse me, I just wondered if I could talk to your HR department and find out who I need to address my application for this internship to, or this covering letter for this internship to. So that's the basics of CVs and covering letters, and that's very, very quick kind of run through. I think we might do another session on CVs as a part of a webinar at a later date. And the final checks when you're filling in an application form for an internship, and the same equally applies for a job, is double check that each section is filled in properly, sense check and proofread. So there's a couple of examples there of people who haven't sense checked and proofread. Ask a family member, ask a friend, ask someone whose English skills you trust, or who has had exceptional luck in getting interviews for internships. So yes, there we go. I'll leave you to read through those, and you can look back at the video if you want to. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to answer questions. I see people are leaving comments. If you're looking for alternatives to summer internships, is the first one we have. If you're looking for an alternative to a summer internship, you have to ask yourself what you're hoping to obtain from that, because is there something that is going to rank in the same way to an employer as an internship will? So at the moment there are alternatives out there. That's what I said at the beginning, is we have a lot of places are now offering insight days, and again, you will need to go to the graduate recruitment section of their website, and where they would have internships, you will look for how to join one of their virtual insight days, and they'll probably have a limited number of places. You may have to make an application even to get that far, but you are getting a lot more virtual sessions on that sort of thing. You can also go to virtual recruitment fairs, and you can listen to talks and seminars, even being involved in webinars like this. You're getting yourself experience, and there are things that you can do just to make yourself better when you're applying for things. Obviously, if you need to get some kind of technical internship experience, there is very little that is going to be a complete replacement for it. But I just wanted to be able to help you make an application. If you haven't made an application yet, make sure that you know who to contact. If you go back to the very early times, if you haven't got one sorted, just that sort of thing, because it's very difficult to have something that will have the same weighting. This is the time to be working on your employability, but it's also about how you think about what you're doing, even when you're at home or when you're in lockdown. So if you have projects and things that you are doing, they are not going to carry the same weight as an internship on your CV. But they are going to be able to demonstrate your skills and experience. And this is something I've talked about this on a number of webinars in the past. And one of the examples I give is playing video games with people online. It's something that everybody I know has been doing in lockdown. And it doesn't sound like the sort of thing you can put on a CV, and it isn't. But if you are organizing anything in group, if you're doing, you know, multiplayer across an internet connection somewhere, and the same could apply to a Zoom quiz, you are learning teamwork skills, you are taking responsibility, you might be showing leadership, you've got organizational skills in there. So those are the kind of things that you can use just for being in lockdown, that can help boost your CV to a state where you have developed skills and experience even without the internship. So there are options like that out there. But the reality is you are more likely going to be looking for insight days. You are more likely going to be looking for open days and for virtual experience. And that's the kind of thing you can find if you look through Target Jobs. You will find people who are offering virtual, I'm sure you'll find, you know, mention of internships and virtual internships. But it depends on what you're going for, how relevant that's going to be. There are some that will be course dependent, and there will be absolutely no way to get that experience until everything is reopened and people can go back into workplaces and get access to labs and machinery and equipment and things like that. So it depends on what kind of field you're in at the moment. But you could also be contacting people to do online qualifications. You know, it's another option for if you can't get an internship, you want to boost your employability. But the thing is to have a career goal in mind when you do these things. It's one, presenting things like, you know, your hobbies, even if it's watching Netflix, in the right way that makes it look like, or makes it, you know, you have developed skills while doing these kind of things. But the other alternative is that you are out there proactively trying to get a course, trying to get a qualification under your belt, and that kind of you know, Coursera do it. There are a number out there. You know, probably should go a bit BBC and say there are many reputable providers out there. Whichever one you choose, you need to know what level that you are going for. Is it going to give you a graded certificate that you can use to present to an employer? Is it going to give you just a kind of verbal agreement that you have completed the course and therefore have these skills? You need to know what you're going to get from it, and you need to know, you know, how you're going to present that to the employer. Is it going to be relevant to the job? Because everybody seems to be talking about, oh, I'm learning to code while in lockdown. That's lovely, unless you want to go for a job as a chef, in which case, you know, you've not been thinking about the career plan when you come to do that kind of thing. So you know, when you're looking for alternatives to some internships, it's more about thinking how you can boost your employability in a way that will carry enough weight that you can put it on your CV, but probably still will not be able to completely replace that valuable kind of work experience, whether it's done virtually or whether it's done in a workplace. So I'm just moving down the question list. What's the best way to find and make contact with small local employers? I mean, we talk a lot about lockdown when we've been doing these webinars, but you are still free to go out you know, walk up and down a high street and have a look around. You can use your eyes, you can use the internet and use Google Maps. If you want to make contact with them, speculative applications are still a thing. Most companies will have an open contact, a customer desk or a help desk. You can reach out to them and say, I just wanted to know, you know, are you offering any internships or placements this summer? Would you if they're not offering internships and placements, would you consider allowing me to do work shadowing for a day? And maybe that will be remotely, maybe that will be in person, depending on the size of the employer and the nature of the work. But you can reach out to them. Nothing wrong with a speculative application. It could be the same CV, covering letter. And I just really wanted to know if you'd let me do work shadowing or an insight day, or tell me a little bit about your work. Sometimes it may even just be a case that you can reach out to someone and say, look, I'm a student, I'm interested in going into the same field that you're in. Would you meet me for a coffee for an hour and just tell me about what you do? And you can offer to pay for the coffee if you can afford it. That always goes down a little bit well. But yeah, I mean, that's the easiest way to make contact with small local employers is look around you when you're actually out and about. Obviously, you've got Google Maps and various other kinds of things to find out where people are. Speculative applications, polite letters, polite emails, polite LinkedIn messages. Never use that bog standard, you know, I'd like to connect on LinkedIn, the kind of robot message. Write to them, hello, I'm a student, I'm studying this, I'm interested in that, I need an internship in this field. I saw that your company is local to me and I just wondered, would you have any time to give me a little bit of work experience, give me an internship, give me a placement, or even a bit of work shadowing? So if you can't get the internship, then you have to go, well, okay, maybe a bit of work shadowing. Can't even do the work shadowing. Are you free for just a coffee? Just tell me a little bit about what you do. And then that goes on your CV. I contacted a local employer to talk about their work, and you know, I understood a little bit more about the skills that need to go into this field, and it's something you can add to that job application. So I hope that's somewhat helpful. As I say, when you're making contact, there are any number of ways to do it. Just the way to do it is to make it polite, make it simple, make it a speculative application. I really want to get some work experience in the field. Is there any chance you do this? Or if you don't, is there any chance you consider it? Or give me a trial period or something like that, just to do an internship for a couple of days. And then if you like me, maybe you'd want to keep me on. You just have to see what kind of responses you get. That's the whole sort of beauty of speculative applications, and somewhat the horror of it as well. Any tips for sending an email to a company that only wants your CV, and how to make a good first impression with that email? And that's a tricky one. And that's a really, really tricky one. You should never be able to just send a CV anonymously, but there are places that do it. Excuse me. So there are places that do it. I would say it's a very similar kind of way to reaching out and contacting local employers. You want to explain who you are and why you're interested and what you're looking for. So, hello, I am a student. I am studying this. I am really, really, passionately set on a career in X, and I've seen your company. And then if you've got that employer research that we talked about, building that connection, that always helps. So I have an interest in this. And because I have an interest in this, I went and did this thing, and it matches up with what your company does. And I really thought that you'd want to give me an internship. Thank you very much. So it's fairly straightforward to make that contact. If you're just going to send a CV, it only needs to be a paragraph just explaining, hello, here's who I am. This is why I'm interested. This is what I've done. And this is why I think I'd be good at the company. My CV is attached. Thank you very much. Or if you're only getting that request for a CV, you need to go full on covering letter. And that's the structure we talked about earlier, where it's why you are the right candidate, why you want to work for that employer. Here's my CV. Thank you very much for reading this covering letter that I've typed into an email unbidden. So that's one way to go about it, and see what kind of response you get. You can't guarantee they're going to read it, but make sure that if you've got a covering letter in an email that's snappy, that it's good, that it points people to your CV, and hopefully they'll take a look. How do you explain long-term unemployment due to COVID-19 on CVs and interviews, etc.? And this is one that has come up before. It's not just unemployment at the moment. So you have to think about how you're going to phrase it. What I would not say is, I was unemployed because of COVID-19 and I watched every single program on Netflix until the end of time. If you're going to talk about it, you need to talk about what you've done that has been proactive to improve yourself. And you can mention COVID-19 and say, due to COVID-19, I wasn't able to get onto an internship, get work, whatever it might be. However, I attended webinars by Target Jobs on how to improve my employability and what to do when I've not got a summer internship. So now I understand a lot more about how I need to present my teamwork skills to you and my commercial awareness skills. And I know that I need to be spending more time being commercially aware at home. You could even say I have spent a lot of my time during COVID-19 becoming more commercially aware. Which is likely true, because everybody has a lot more time for reading. You are following issues through the press, and you'll be able to relate them to an employer that you're going to apply to. So the key thing is not to make excuses that COVID-19, I don't mean make excuses in a negative sense. It's just that you have to understand how it looks to an employer. If you've got that on the CV and you're just saying, well, COVID-19 left me unemployed. No, that's actually not helping you, right? So they are not going to find that interesting. They are not going to find that useful. It isn't going to score you any extra points anywhere or give you any leniency. And it's not putting forward you as your best self. You will have done something, and even if that's just getting through this, that's okay. I worked on my resilience by finding projects that occupy my time. I worked through these kind of problems by contacting friends, by organizing group things, whatever it is. You must have done something during this pandemic and during the lockdown period that you can use. And we've had this discussion with a number of employers as well. And it's even things like, everybody talks about baking. Baking has become the thing, whether you like it or not. Everybody has been baking, and there is something to be said. I have reformed. I had to reformulate my dough all these times, and I had to learn a lot about it. And I'm very organized, and now I keep it on a timer, and I know when I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to take it out of the oven. It shows, it's not something that is going to be a registered term of employment, and it may not have as much of an impact. But everybody's in this situation at the moment if they're looking for work, if they're looking for internships. So use what you have been doing, whether that's, you know, I've had people who've been repairing bikes, and it sounds okay, that's fine. Then they've been selling them. So they've got a little bit of business acumen that they can add there when they go for their next internship post. And they say, well, actually, I didn't start my own business, but I became a little bit of a sole trader, and I was using my mechanical skills to do this, and I was selling bikes on to do that. So you've got a little bit of usable skills there that aren't registered employment, but they are showing that you have kept active. They are showing that you have tried to keep up on the kind of skills and qualities that an employer is looking for. And that is what I think you have to do when you're talking about the last couple of years, is saying, all right, I wasn't employed because of the pandemic, but this is what I did do. And you really want to start with just what you did. You don't even necessarily, everybody knows how bad the last year has been. You just want to start with what it is you actually did and what you learned from it, and relate it to the kind of skills that you're going to see employers asking for in internships and in jobs. So I hope that helps a little bit. The next question, how do you know what to do better in an application if the only feedback is that the other candidates had more experience than you? And that is, I hate that answer when that comes back to you. Well, they just had more skills and experience. The feedback there is almost get more experience or get more skills. You know, it's go out there and try to increase the amount of experience that you've got, increase the kind of skills that you've got. But I would personally go back to employers and ask that. And sometimes you don't get a response by email. When you get feedback like that, you say, look, you know, what would you recommend I do? And they'll say, well, you just need to get another couple of months doing this job, or doing a placement somewhere, or doing a little bit of free work experience, whatever. We don't advocate free work experience because it shouldn't be the case, but maybe it's work shadowing. It's something that you need to do to enhance the profile of your experience if that's what they're asking. But generally, go back to the employer, and sometimes it's better to pick up the phone because they might not have time to answer an email, but they'll tell you in 2 minutes over the phone exactly what it is they meant to say to you in order to improve. Because I realize that isn't helpful, but it is saying to you, you need to have more on your CV that denotes you as having more experience. And whether that's skills or whether that's you know, insight days or something, get a larger number of them on there, and maybe you'll be the one that gets it the next time when the other people have said, well, you just didn't have the right amount, you know, you didn't have enough experience. But it is very difficult to learn and to improve from that kind of thing, and it's worth taking your CV to your careers service if you have one, or if you have access to it. Get them to look it over and see what they think, see whether you've presented your skills and experience in the right light, to see whether you can improve it. And you can also ask friends and family, but the important thing is to look to improve your CV and your covering letters. Like even if, you know, ignoring all feedback, if you get that kind of rejection where you've just been passed up, that's fine. It happens. That's life. Just make sure that you improve and you build on it when you're going into your next job, and not to dwell on the fact that you've been given these kind of sort of unhelpful feedback. But as I say, always try and pick up the phone first, see maybe they'll talk to you, because it might just be a case that, well, we just needed you to have been to an insight day, or maybe to have spoken to us a bit more. And then if you build a bit of a conversation on LinkedIn around that as well, suddenly, you know, maybe you've gotten to know a little bit more about the company, and the next time that you apply, you might be successful. So I hope that helps. Are recorded interviews assessed by AI? Honestly, I have seen some articles in the US that are suggesting there are places that do this. I will be honest, I've anecdotally not heard from any employers that use AI to assess videos. I have not come across an instance of that so far. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but at this time, it's still a little bit, I think, too early to have people being assessed by AI, unless you're probably going for some massive tech company where they're testing out this kind of thing and you'd likely be working on it in future. I think it's highly unlikely that it's going to be assessed by AI, particularly if they take the time to record everything and whatnot. Chances are someone will sit through the 5-minute responses you've given to an application form with recorded video. So the question, is it too late to get an internship for this summer? It will depend on what sector you're in. It is a lot of this is why a lot of it was to suggest that you contact your university and make sure if you need this for your course, make sure that you're proactively contacting your lecturers, your career service, and your administrators and anyone else. There are still places available, and as we've talked about throughout this webinar, there are other ways you can reach out to employers, speculative applications, particularly to perhaps smaller local employers who may be willing to take you on even as a form of work shadowing. You can definitely go ahead and try to do it. You can always try, you can always reach out, but have a look. It depends on what sector you're in, and make sure that you research the companies and their deadlines thoroughly so that you know when you need to apply and when they're closing their application deadlines. Always make sure that you're applying earlier rather than later. How do you include an unrelated work experience if you have none suited to your career? You will have learnt soft skills from work experience, unrelated as it may be to the field in which you might be applying. You will have learnt skills. If you have work experience, you have learnt something. Even if you are, for example, going to apply to some form of banking and you've been working in a supermarket, you may not feel that it's particularly related, well, it's just you're putting things on shelves and working on checkouts. But you've probably had to deal with difficult customers. You have probably had to make decisions about how to make priorities with your time. Use the soft skills. Talk about the soft skills that you used while you were doing those periods of work experience if they're not suited to that specific career, and try to use those soft skills as a way to say, look, well, actually, because everybody needs to talk to difficult customers or difficult parties or difficult colleagues sometimes. So you must have had to deal with someone who was difficult. Maybe everybody needs to keep track of items or money or products or something that may be going out, and that will be relevant. So there's always going to be a way that you can build the link between unrelated work experience to a technical field, but you are going to be looking more at the softer skills, which is your people skills, your communication skills, your problem solving, your organization, because you will have used all of those and they will be relevant to most workplaces. So always look at the kind of softer skills you're getting from your work experience. Try to use those. Go back through this video if you want and have a look at what we talked about, the STAR method. Present some of the examples from your time working at the unrelated work experience and use that to leverage your softer skills going forward. I hope that helps. We've just had a question about, due to a lack of experience, any tips to navigating this? And the thing is just to make sure that you're boosting your employability. It's always, even if you're at home and it's doing things that you aren't considering to be work experience, maybe you are looking after relatives, maybe you are cooking, baking, mechanics, fixing, anything, volunteering even, get involved. The NHS still has some of the volunteering schemes. I think they're still running. Go on local websites, go on local Facebook pages, see if you can get involved some way. Get experience, and again, even if it's unrelated, start using those soft skills. Just make sure that you are progressing every time between applications, that you're not just going, okay, well, I don't have the experience and I can't get in the related field and give up. You just need to make sure that you're doing something to stay proactive, stay employable, and keep boosting your employability. Here we go. Employers want university leadership and teamwork activities in applicants, but there has been none for over a year. Now, okay, so are we telling you, we are still, you're here now, we're surrounded by over 100, 150 other people. There must have been some form of teamwork. There must have been some form of communication. You must have been keeping it in touch with your classmates. And the same thing, responsibility, when you're talking about leadership, as in the sense of leadership, they just want to see that you have had responsibility for something that has involved other people. And that, that could be absolutely anything, whether it's just making sure that you contact your research group when you want to talk about a topic, or taking part in a reading group. It's the responsibility that matters. You don't need to have the official title leader of the reading group. Like you could just be someone who is involved in organizing it, who has a bit of responsibility to make sure one person or two people show up. You must have had some form of communication with the outside world throughout lockdown, even if it's remotely. It's not the best way to do it, I know. But you need to look at what you have done and when you have interacted with people, and try to draw on the aspects of teamwork, even if it's just communication, even if it's just like, well, we didn't have any official teamwork assignments, but we really needed to work together. So we all kept in touch on Skype or Zoom or Teams or whatever it is that you want to use. So it's not that there hasn't been any kind of activity for a year. It's not like everything just stopped. You still must have been talking to your fellow students. You probably have still been contacting your lecturers, administrators. You've had your own projects. You will have had responsibility for something, even if that's just responsibility for your own life. You need to have, you must have had an impact on someone somewhere. So don't look at it as in we haven't had that structured classroom learning that we desperately need to give us the experience. Try and think about what you've been doing in your own time, remotely, via Teams, via even WhatsApp groups, whatever it might be. You must have been communicating with someone somewhere, and try to leverage that as examples of your communication, of your teamwork. And if, as I say, if you've had responsibility for more than one thing with more than one group of people, use that as well. And if you haven't, set it up. Set up something, whether it's a quiz night and it happens once or twice. That's your once or twice that you need for that star example. I organised a quiz night as the leader of the quiz night. Leadership, it's a responsibility. You're bringing people into that quiz night. We got 3 people together. We asked 5 questions. We gave them scores at the end, and everybody had a good time. Great leadership example. You know, it's there, it's done. I started this, we did this, we followed through, it involved other people, and I had responsibility. Use that, set something up. If you're not getting it on the course, you need, and you need it for your course, then you need to actually speak to your lecturers, as I said, or speak to your administrators, whoever it might be. But there are plenty of ways you can do it outside of university, and there are plenty of ways that you can still do it in a very short amount of time if you think about it, and then add that to your CV. Obviously, don't fabricate it. Do actually do something if you say you're going to put it on your CV. Next one, I hope that helps. What do we think about virtual internships or courses where you have to pay for them up to £200 for the experience? And I see them often advertised on LinkedIn. We talked a little bit about the weight of virtual courses earlier, and it is making sure that it meets your career needs. If it is valuable enough to your CV, your chances, your career, and the employer, that it is worth that amount of money for you, then maybe it's worth doing it. If it's not, or if you're not sure, it's a lot of money to spend on something if you're uncertain. And what I would say is politely reach out to the employer for the particular type of course that you're thinking about. Ask them what they think, how valid a qualification they see it, and how valuable they see it, because they may say to you, well, we wouldn't really consider something like that to be useful, because this is what I was saying earlier, it needs to be to do with your long-term career goals. So you need to know if you're going to spend that money, that it is going to make an active difference to your application for an internship, for a job. And you need to know that it's going to take you in the right discipline as well that you're going to move into. So I hope that helps. I know it's difficult when you're making these kind of decisions. I would also look around at the free options and see, as it's judging, are you going to have a face-to-face mentor? Are you going to have, is it not going to be face-to-face? Are you going to have a mentor at all? Are you going to have a teacher? It's knowing what you're going to get for that money, and then how widely known the certificate or the qualification or whatever it is you're going to get at the end of it is. If it may even just be a skills course, and you're maybe like, I just need to know how to do, I don't know, video editing work or something. You might be happy to pay £200 for that, because you want a professional to teach you. They've got professional teaching the course. You maybe don't get a certificate, but you'll know how to edit videos, and that's something you can say to an employer, and you can give the name of the guy who gave you the course, or you did the course. But again, usually worth checking out with the employer to see whether it's useful. I'm terribly sorry about this, because we have actually run out of time. I just want to say, I realize it was a slightly different sort of format session to usual, but I really do hope it was useful. Please do, just if you found anything useful in this, let me know in the chat or the question box. I want to thank you all for giving up your time and listening to us today, and I wish you the very best of luck in finding an internship, a placement, or on just building your employability during what has been a really, really tricky last year or so, and it feels a lot longer than that. So thank you once again for joining us, and I wish you a good afternoon, and I will hopefully see you in the next webinar. Bye-bye.